My name's William, and I'm 31 now. I haven't spoken to my parents in almost a year, not since the reunion, not since the meltdown, not since the truth slipped out like a jagged little secret too sharp to keep hidden. But before all of that, before the shouting and the shaking and the way my mother wouldn't meet my eyes, I was just the independent one. You know, the label families like to use when they want to pretend they're proud of how little they do for you. The title they slap on the child they've already quietly written off. Growing up, it was always about Sarah, my sister, 2 years younger, golden brown curls like my mother's, a dimple that made old ladies stop in grocery stores and coo over her. She wasn't just the favorite, she was the plan. Everything revolved around making sure she had what she needed to thrive, which in our house translated to whatever Sarah wants, Sarah gets. And me? I was resourceful, apparently. At least that's what they called it when I asked why Sarah got a car for her 17th birthday while I biked to my part-time job in the rain. You're just so independent, well. You always figure it out. They'd say it like a compliment, like handing me a scrap and clapping for how well I chewed. My dad was a quiet man, the kind who avoided eye contact at dinner but became animated when Sarah talked about her school projects. Mom was louder, always planning things, school fundraisers, church events, Sarah's birthday parties that somehow always had themes and rented tents. She used to work in HR before she scaled back to focus on family, which I eventually learned meant she worked part-time from home, mostly reviewing documents for a small company she called her consultancy. She called herself a mentor. To Sarah, when I turned 18, I was handed a firm handshake from Dad and a brochure for state college. "You'll do fine," he said. "We raised you to stand on your own." I didn't have the heart to tell him that's only true if someone teaches you how to walk in the first place. Meanwhile, Sarah got a different experience entirely. Full tuition to a private liberal arts college 3 states away. A monthly allowance. A leased BMW. She's going to be a psychologist, Mom beamed. She just has the kind of heart for people. I try not to take that as a jab, but when you've been the background character long enough, even the softest lines start to cut deep. I didn't resent Sarah at first. She was just playing the role they wrote for her. In high school, she was sweet to everyone, the kind of girl who got flowers on Valentine's Day from the whole soccer team. I remember once, junior year, she found me in the garage trying to fix my bike chain with greasy fingers and offered to help. We laughed. She was wearing a dress and still knelt down to hold the frame steady. For a moment, it felt like we were just brother and sister, no politics, no favoritism, just kids trying to help each other. I clung to that memory a long time. But college changed her. Or maybe the way our parents indulged her in college changed her. She came back from her first semester with a designer purse, an offhand laugh, and the kind of tone that made every sentence feel like a performance. Everything became a story with her at the center. If I mentioned something good happening in my life, she'd tilt her head and smile like she was indulging a child playing grown-up. After graduation, she didn't even apply to jobs. Mom offered her a position at the consultancy. She called it an apprenticeship. Said she was learning the ropes of real leadership. From what I could tell, Sarah mostly sent emails and joined Zoom calls with other part-time moms who all used words like synergy and empowerment while sipping wine out of mugs labeled Boss Lady. Me? I worked through college waiting tables, tutoring calculus, anything I could to get through without loans. I graduated with a degree in computer science and got a job at a mid-sized startup. I coded during the day and freelanced at night. I lived cheap. Saved, taught myself new frameworks, kept up with trends. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. No handouts, no leased BMW. But the thing about being independent is that it's lonely. I'd come home for Thanksgiving, sit at the table while Sarah held court, and watch as my mom served her a second helping without asking. Dad would nod along to everything she said, while I was lucky to get a how's work before they started talking about Sarah's upcoming spa weekend or the networking retreat in Napa Mom was taking her on. I used to try. Really. I'd bring gifts. Offer to help around the house. I even made Sarah a custom-coded budgeting app once, something slick and simple with a beautiful UI that tracked expenses and helped with savings goals. I gave it to her over Christmas dinner. She said, "Ah, that's cute," and never opened the file. That was the last gift I brought. Things came to a head last year. It started with the reunion. My mom's side of the family, big and dramatic, decided to hold a formal family reunion at a rented vineyard. Everyone was coming, second cousins, great-uncles, even my Aunt Linda who lives in Italy. Sarah, of course, was helping plan the whole thing with Mom. "It's going to be elegant but relaxed," she said. "Like a Nancy Meyers movie, but with better food." She said this to me while sitting cross-legged in a velvet armchair, sipping oat milk from a wine glass. I wasn't planning to go, but my cousin Eric called me out of the blue and said, "You should come. Really, it won't be the same without you." Eric and I were close as kids. He's one of the few who always treated me like I mattered, even when our family didn't. I hadn't seen him in years, so I said yes. The moment I walked into the venue, I knew I was out of place. Everyone was dressed like they were attending a wedding. String lights wrapped around trees. A live band played soft jazz. And at the center of it all, Sarah stood with a flute of champagne, laughing at something Mom whispered to her. She looked like she belonged there. I looked like I'd come to reset the Wi-Fi. But then Eric came over and hugged me like no time had passed, and for the first hour, it was actually nice. A few of my younger cousins were asking about the app I'd built that went viral earlier that year. I'd just sold a version of it to a mid-sized financial firm, and the licensing money was enough to make me seriously consider quitting my day job. I didn't bring it up, someone else did, and suddenly I was talking about machine learning and data privacy to a circle of people who genuinely seemed interested. That's when Sarah saw me. She walked over, plastered on a smile, and said, "William, it's been forever. Are you still doing that tech stuff?" I said I was. She tilted her head. "That's so great for you. I think it's so important to find work that keeps you busy." I felt my jaw tighten. "Yeah," I said. "It's been good. We just signed a deal with." But she was already looking past me, waving at someone else. I let it go. I always did. But then dinner started, and the real fun began. Mom gave a toast. She thanked everyone for coming, praised the organizers, complimented the caterers. And then she said, "Of course, none of this would have happened without Sarah. She's the reason we're all here tonight. She keeps this family connected." There was a small round of polite applause. My fork froze midair. Eric shot me a look across the table. I smiled, nodded, tried not to let it sting. But then Sarah stood up, clearly moved by the moment, and gave a speech of her own. It was long, flowery, full of inside jokes I wasn't part of. At one point she said, "Honestly, I wouldn't be half the woman I am today without my parents' support. They've always believed in me, funded my dreams, made me feel like I could do anything." That part was true. What wasn't true was the way she glanced at me when she said it, as if daring me to disagree, as if reminding me who got the support and who didn't. But I stayed quiet. Until dessert. That's when Eric leaned over and said something I'll never forget. His voice was low, careful. "You know, I always wondered if you ever found out." I looked at him. "About what?" He hesitated. "Never mind. It's not my place." That made my stomach twist. "Eric, what are you talking about?" He took a slow sip of his wine, then looked me dead in the eye. "The trust fund," he said. "The one your grandparents set up for both of you. You know, the one they said was split evenly." I didn't move. I couldn't. My mind was already racing, fingers curling against the edge of the table. Because I did know about the trust fund. At least, I thought I did. But suddenly, everything I thought I knew, everything I had assumed about why I had to scrape and save while Sarah floated through life, started to unravel. And that's when Sarah's voice rang out across the table, loud and clear. "So, William, what do you do again?" she said, like she was challenging me to perform. And I smiled. I didn't answer Sarah right away. Instead, I let the silence stretch just a little too long. Long enough for her smile to twitch at the corners. Long enough for heads at the table to turn. Long enough to make her squirm, if only slightly. Then I leaned back in my chair and said calmly, "I run my own software company." It wasn't even a brag. It was just the truth. A few of my cousins, the ones who'd been asking about my app earlier, perked up. Someone murmured, "Wait, you own it now?" Sarah blinked, then let out a laugh that sounded just a touch forced. "Wow, that's impressive. Good for you," she said, in that sing-song tone reserved for toddlers who managed to tie their shoes. Then she turned back to the group and launched into a story about some influencers she'd met at a women's leadership brunch. Just like that, I was dismissed again. But I couldn't focus on her voice anymore. Eric's words kept playing over and over in my mind. The trust fund. I always assumed our grandparents had left some money for us. They'd passed when I was in high school. No one really talked specifics, just vague nods to putting it towards Sarah's education and how I was better off figuring things out on my own. At the time, I was too busy juggling school and my part-time job to question it. Besides, they made it sound like there wasn't much left. But now I was staring at my parents across the table, watching as my dad poured Sarah another glass of wine while Mom adjusted the shawl around her shoulders like she was royalty. And a deep, heavy stone settled in my chest. I needed answers. After dinner, the family split up to mingle across the courtyard. I caught Eric by the bar. "You're not just messing with me, right?" I asked low. "About the trust?" He shook his head, serious now. "I found out by accident a few years ago. My mom, your Aunt Marla, was talking about it at a family brunch. Said your grandparents left each of you around $75,000 to be held in trust until you turned 21. She assumed you used yours for college or something." My stomach dropped. "I didn't see a dime," I said flatly. Eric's mouth tightened. "Then you should ask your parents what happened to it." I didn't sleep that night. I stayed in my hotel room, staring at the ceiling fan spinning like the thoughts in my head. Every memory twisted and reshaped itself. Sarah's tuition, the BMW, the post-grad spa retreats, the fact that she never once seemed to worry about money. The next morning, before breakfast, I cornered my mom outside the main house. She was on the phone, pacing near the hydrangeas, but I stepped right into her path. "Mom, can we talk?" She looked startled, then annoyed. "William, I'm on a call. It's important." With a sigh, she lowered the phone. "What's going on?" I got straight to the point. "Did Grandma and Grandpa leave a trust fund for me?" She blinked. Her expression didn't change, but her body tensed. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Eric told me they did. Said we were both supposed to get 75 grand when we turned 21. I never got anything." Her lips thinned. "That money was used to help the family, William." I stared at her. "The family? Or Sarah?" She didn't answer. I felt my voice rising, sharp with disbelief. "So you just took it? You let me work through school, go into debt, live off ramen, while you gave Sarah a private college, a car, and a salary to send emails for you." Her tone turned brittle. "We did what was best for everyone. You always managed. You didn't need the help." "No," I said, my jaw clenching. "You just decided I didn't deserve it." She opened her mouth like she was going to protest, but nothing came out. I walked away before I could say something I'd regret, or worse, something I wouldn't. After that, the reunion was a blur. I barely made eye contact with anyone. Every polite smile felt fake. Every compliment from extended family about how well I'd turned out felt like a cruel joke. Sarah, of course, was oblivious. She floated through the weekend like a debutante at her coming-out party. On the last day, right before people started packing up, she caught me in the hallway of the main house. "Hey," she said brightly. "You seem kind of quiet this weekend. Everything okay?" I looked at her. For the first time in my life, I really looked. Not as my sister, not as the golden girl, but as someone who'd lived in the center of a lie and never once questioned the cost. "Did you know about the trust fund?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "What? Did you know Mom and Dad used my share to fund your life?" She looked away for a second too long. "They told me they were reallocating some things. For education. They said you didn't need it." I stepped closer. "And you didn't think to ask where mine went?" She bristled. "I was a teenager, William. I didn't know the details. But you never asked. You never cared. You just assumed I'd be fine, like always." "That's not fair," she snapped. "I didn't make those decisions." "No," I said. "You just benefited from them. And you never once looked back." Her face hardened. "You've always had a chip on your shoulder about this family. Maybe if you didn't act like such a martyr, people would include you more." I laughed. I couldn't help it. "Include me? You mean like when you planned this entire reunion without even asking if I wanted to be involved? Like when Mom gave a speech praising you for keeping the family together and didn't even mention me?" She folded her arms. "This isn't about me, William. You're making it about me because you're bitter." And there it was. The final twist of the knife. I walked away before I could explode. I spent the next few weeks back home in my apartment, replaying every moment like a bad movie I couldn't stop watching. I didn't call my parents. They didn't call me. I guess they figured I'd cool off, sweep it under the rug like I always had. But something had changed in me. It wasn't just about the money. It was the betrayal, the quiet, insidious way they'd carved me out of the picture and called it independence. The way they propped Sarah up with stolen bricks from my foundation and then applauded her for standing tall. And then came the final straw. A letter in the mail. From a law office in town. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Then I opened it. It was a statement. A summary of the trust fund accounts from 15 years ago. How it had been split. When it was cashed out. Where the funds were transferred. My name was on it. But the account had been drained in 2009. The same year Sarah went off to college. The memo line on the withdrawal? Tuition. No mention of me. No record of consent. No co-signature. They'd taken it. Cashed out my future for hers. I didn't sleep that night either. For weeks, I didn't talk to anyone in my family. No texts. No calls. No birthday messages. I let the silence speak for me. And you know what? Nobody noticed. Or if they did, they chose not to care. The thing about being invisible your whole life is, when you finally disappear, people aren't surprised. They just assume you've gone off to be independent again. And for a while, I didn't correct them. I was angry. Not just at my parents, not just at Sarah, but at myself. For believing them. For playing along. For treating their neglect like some kind of twisted compliment. I kept thinking back to all those nights I sat alone in my dorm eating chili, while Sarah sent Instagram stories from wine tastings and ski trips. I remembered calling home to tell Mom about my first promotion and how she said, "That's nice, dear," before asking if I thought Sarah's new logo looked better in navy or teal. All of it came crashing down now. Years of overlooked effort. The constant, quiet ache of being the backup plan. It was grief, really. I was mourning a version of my family that never existed. And grief has a way of making you still. For a while, I stopped coding. I slept in. I missed deadlines on freelance projects I would have once killed for. The business I had poured so much of myself into suddenly felt hollow. What was the point of working so hard if no one ever saw it? If the people who raised me could take my success and reduce it to a footnote in Sarah's story? One night, about a month after the reunion, I sat on my couch staring at my TV, volume off, screen black, and thought about shutting it all down. The company, the contracts, the LLC, just vanishing, getting a regular job, disappearing into the blur of adult life. No expectations, no betrayal, just quiet. But something stopped me. It was a comment on my company's feedback page. I hadn't checked it in weeks. But this one, left by a small business owner from Minnesota, hit different. All I can say is thank you. Your budgeting software helped me get out of debt and finally afford health insurance for my kids. I hope you keep building, because people like me need people like you. I read it 3 times. That woman didn't care if my family liked me. She didn't care if I drove a used car or if my parents thought my work was cute. She cared that I made something that helped her. That mattered. And I realized I had spent so long chasing validation from people who never intended to give it that I lost sight of the people who already saw me. So I got off the couch. I opened my laptop. And I got to work. First, I cleaned house. Ended contracts with 2 toxic clients who were underpaying me and constantly shifting deadlines. I raised my rates and restructured my offerings into packages I could actually manage without burning out. Then I reached out to a few design friends and invested in a full rebrand. New site, updated app UI, sleek onboarding experience. I applied for an accelerator program for minority-owned tech startups. The pitch process was brutal, but I leaned into it. I told my story. Not the sob story, just the truth. Built it myself. No seed funding. No family money. Real growth. Real users. Real results. I got in. The funding wasn't life-changing. $50K in seed cash and a 3-month mentorship pipeline. But it was something better. It was recognition. From strangers. From people who weren't looking at me through the lens of, well, at least you're doing okay for yourself. They saw potential, and they helped me sharpen it. During that program, I met investors, collaborators, even a startup lawyer who offered to help me for free until I hit my next revenue milestone. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was building something in the dark. And then came the call that changed everything. It was from a CFO at a mid-sized healthcare company. They'd seen a demo of my app at a networking event I couldn't even attend in person. Someone else had presented it, said this guy built it solo, no debt, no outside help. The CFO wanted a custom version tailored to their internal staff, and they were willing to pay more than I'd made in the last year combined. We signed a 6-month contract, half up front. By the end of that week, I'd paid off the rest of my student loans and moved out of my 1-bedroom apartment into a modest but sun-filled townhouse in a quiet part of the city. Nothing flashy, just clean air and space to breathe. And here's the thing, I didn't tell anyone. Not my parents. Not Sarah. Not even Eric. Not because I didn't trust him, but because I needed this win to be mine. I wanted to feel what it was like to grow without anyone else's shadow falling over me. But the universe has a funny way of pulling people back in at the worst, or best, moments. 3 months later, I got a text from my dad. Dad, hey Will, hope you're doing okay. Could use your help with something when you get a chance. No, sorry. No, let's talk. Just a favor. I ignored it. 2 days later, a voicemail from my mom. William, I know you're upset, but we really need to speak with you. Your father and I have run into a bit of a financial snag and could use some guidance. Sarah's been very stressed, and it's affecting her work with me. Call us back. There it was. The first time they reached out to me in months, maybe years, and it wasn't to apologize. It was to ask for help, and not even directly. Just the vague suggestion that I owed them a conversation. Part of me wanted to delete the message and move on. But the other part, the one that spent decades being overlooked, dismissed, diminished, leaned forward. I called Eric. He picked up on the second ring. Hey, thought you were dead. Not dead. Just busy. I heard. Rumor has it you landed a healthcare contract. That true? I smiled. Yeah, and some other stuff. I've been building. He was quiet for a second. Then, proud of you, man. Seriously, that meant more than I expected. I hesitated. I need a favor. Shoot. I want to know everything. About the trust fund. About what mom and dad said. About what Sarah knew. Anything you've heard over the years. Eric didn't hesitate. I can do better. I have some emails. Aunt Marla forwarded them once by accident. Copies of conversations between your mom and the trustee. She was bragging about how smart she was for consolidating the accounts to avoid taxes. Said it was better that way. Cleaner. My blood went cold. You still have those? Yup. You want them? I want everything. And just like that, the last piece of the puzzle clicked into place. I didn't rush. That's the part people never understand about revenge. It's not about blowing up someone's life overnight. That's just noise. The real power is in the silence before the strike, in letting them feel safe, smug, maybe even forgiven. Because when the fall finally comes, it doesn't just hurt, it disorients. Eric sent me the emails the next day. I don't know what I expected, but there was something uniquely disgusting about reading my mother's words in plain black text, bragging to a family friend about how she'd reallocated my portion of the trust to avoid what she called pointless taxation on William's future. As if my future wasn't real. As if I was just a temporary inconvenience that could be patched over with financial gymnastics. The email chain started in early 2009, right before Sarah's freshman year. One message in particular hit hard. We've decided to use both trust accounts for Sarah's tuition. It's a better long-term investment for the family. William won't need the money. He's gotten into a state school and can work part-time. That's more his style anyway. He's practical. Sarah is the one with vision. I sat in silence after reading it. Not angry. Not even shocked anymore. Just hollow. They made that decision like I wasn't even a person. But that last line, Sarah is the one with vision. That was the one that stuck in my ribs. Because it wasn't just favoritism. It was dismissal, condescension, a statement that I didn't have potential, that I wasn't worth the same investment. And the irony? I had vision, just not the kind they were looking for. I spent the next 2 weeks carefully documenting everything. I compiled the emails, downloaded financial reports from the law office, and had Eric notarize a written affidavit stating what he knew and how he came to learn about it. I hired a forensic accountant to go through my grandparents' estate distribution records and flag any irregularities. He found a dozen. Transfers that should have been split were consolidated into a single account under my mother's name. He even traced the tuition payments, straight from the trust into the bursar's office at Sarah's college. I didn't want money back. Not really. What I wanted was acknowledgement. Exposure. I wanted them to see what it felt like to be helpless while someone else played God with your future. But most of all, I wanted the next move to be on my terms. And then, opportunity walked through my door. Her name was Monica Alvarez. She was one of the mentors I'd met during the Startup Accelerator, a strategic consultant who worked with small firms transitioning into large-scale operations. She was sharp, direct, and had a sense for blood in the water. When I told her, vaguely, about the family drama, she tilted her head. You're telling me they used a trust meant for you without your consent, funded your sister's entire life, and still think you owe them emotional support? Pretty much. And now they want help from you. Yeah. She leaned back in her chair. Then don't just help them. Own them. At first, I thought she was kidding. But then she smiled slowly and pulled out her iPad. Tell me everything about what your mom's consultancy actually does. So I did. And as it turned out, my mom's business was smoke. It wasn't a full consultancy, not really. It was a boutique HR service that operated in a narrow niche, helping wellness influencers and boutique fitness studios scale their hiring practices. It sounded more legitimate than it was. Most of her work involved writing contracts, doing payroll setups, and managing benefit spreadsheets. She only had 3 regular clients, according to Eric, and one of them was on the verge of backing out due to repeated billing errors Sarah had caused. Apparently, the apprenticeship wasn't going so well behind the scenes. So what's the endgame? Monica asked. I want to show them I was never the backup plan, I said. And I want Sarah to know what it feels like to be sidelined. Then let's give her a lesson in what real vision looks like. Together, we came up with a 3-part plan. No fireworks. No public screaming matches. Just quiet, controlled leverage. Step 1, the offer. I waited 2 more weeks before I finally returned my parents' call. They picked up on the second ring, voices tight with nervous cheer. William, so good to hear from you. Mom chirped. We were just talking about. I know, I said. Eric told me. There was silence on the line. Then Dad cleared his throat. Look, son, we didn't mean to. I'm not calling to rehash the past. I interrupted. I'm calling because I heard your business is struggling, and I think I can help. More silence. I'm expanding, I continued. Hiring a full-time HR consultant. Someone to manage employee onboarding, payroll, compliance. You're good at that, right? The line crackled with confusion. You're offering me a job? Mom asked. I'm offering a contract, I clarified. 6 months. Competitive pay. Flexible hours. Remote work. I'll need references, of course. It was the bait. And they took it. Oh, sweetheart. That would mean so much, she said. You have no idea how much pressure we're under right now. Sarah's been. Sarah wouldn't be involved, I said flatly. This would be your contract. Just you. Professional terms. I could practically hear her calculating. I understand, she said, a little too quickly. That's probably for the best. Step 2, the separation. Once she signed the contract, which included a non-disclosure clause, a non-compete agreement, and a performance review clause, I assigned her her first batch of work. It was legitimate but challenging, streamlining onboarding workflows for a new financial client of mine, cleaning up compliance issues, and restructuring benefit documentation. She did fine. At first. But within a few weeks, her communication lagged. Deadlines slipped. Deliverables came back half-finished. I gave her formal feedback, professionally written, tracked and shared documents, and CC'd Monica on all correspondence. The second month, I reduced her hours based on unmet KPIs, per the contract. The third month, I sent her a warning notice. It wasn't cruel. It was business. And then came the part one was waiting for. Sarah called me. I didn't even know she still had my number. Her name lit up on my screen while I was walking home from a client meeting. I picked up. William, she said, not even trying to hide the frustration. What are you doing to Mom? I'm employing her, I said, which is more than she ever did for me. This is insane. She's exhausted. She's crying every night. You're burying her in work just to make a point. No, I said calmly. I'm paying her to do what she told everyone she was good at. If she can't handle that, maybe she was never the expert she claimed to be. She was quiet for a moment. Then she scoffed. You've changed. No, Sarah, I said. You just never looked close enough to see who I was. She hung up. Step 3, the reveal. The final piece came when I got an invitation to a small local business conference. Nothing huge, just a panel on ethical entrepreneurship and family-run businesses. Monica was speaking on day 2. She asked me to join her. I agreed. At the panel, she opened by talking about trust. How so many entrepreneurs start without it, how they build it with clients, and how sometimes the people closest to you can be the most dishonest. Then she turned the mic over to me. I didn't name names. I didn't call out my family. But I told my story. How my education was paid for by late nights and minimum wage jobs. How I built my company with zero funding. How a trust fund I never received became the fire that forged my independence. And how the people who once dismissed me now worked for me, on my terms. The room was silent. And then they applauded. Later that evening, I got a text. It was from Sarah. Sarah, I hope it was worth it. I didn't reply. Because it wasn't about worth. It was about truth. And now, all the pieces were in place. This was closure. This was for every dinner I sat through, invisible. For every time they told me I was doing fine on my own, while secretly stealing from me to fund Sarah's dream life. This was for the boy they forgot and the man they never saw coming. It began with a letter. A formal, emotionless letter drafted by Monica's legal team and sent via certified mail to both of my parents. Inside was a detailed breakdown of the trust fund irregularities, complete with dates, bank statements, and the emails Eric had dug up. It laid out the misuse of my share, the lack of disclosure, and the unethical redirection of funds from a minor's designated inheritance. No threats, no demands, just facts. 2 days later, I got a voicemail from my mother. She sounded frantic, breathless. William, I don't know what this is, where this is coming from. We did what we thought was right. Please, can we talk? This is all a misunderstanding. It wasn't. I waited a week before responding. When I did, it was through my lawyer. We weren't suing them. That wasn't the goal. But the letter clarified that I could, if I wanted to. It cited precedent cases, included rough damages based on what the money would have been worth today with interest. It stopped just short of filing a claim, but it made the consequences very, very clear. And then came the second letter. This one was addressed to the 3 clients of my mother's consultancy. It was written by a different lawyer, an advisor of mine who specialized in business integrity. It didn't accuse her of criminal activity. It simply outlined concerns around past misuse of funds, incomplete reporting, and an active performance issue I had documented through our contract. The goal wasn't to destroy her. It was to make sure she couldn't hide behind her carefully curated boss lady persona anymore. The truth was out, and people were watching. The fallout was immediate. One client dropped her within the week. The second one called for an audit of the last 12 months of services. The third client, which happened to be a boutique yoga studio chain with a growing online presence, called me. Their COO had attended the conference where I spoke. She asked if I'd be interested in consulting directly. I said yes. Within a month, my mother's business was down to a trickle. No more spa retreats. No more backpatting brunches. Just a desk, a cluttered inbox, and a reputation that no amount of Pinterest quotes could fix. And Sarah? Oh, Sarah felt the tremor too. Without the consultancy to hide inside, she was suddenly expected to stand on her own. Clients no longer tolerated her missed emails or tone-deaf branding suggestions. The bubble burst. The apprenticeship ended. I don't know where she works now. I heard through Eric that she's doing freelance marketing for a few small local businesses. Nothing stable. The BMW lease ended. The influencer brunches stopped. And the last time she posted on social media, the caption read, "Starting over is hard, but necessary." No mention of why. As for my parents, the silence grew louder. They stopped trying to reach out. I think they realized, finally, that I wasn't their safety net. That they couldn't call me when they needed help without acknowledging how badly they'd burned the bridge. But it wasn't just about punishment. I wasn't trying to destroy them. I just wanted them to feel it. The weight of what they'd done. The cost of erasing your own child from the picture and pretending it was love. The only person I did stay in touch with was Eric. He came by my new place a few months later, walking through the front door with a bottle of whiskey and a stupid grin. "I saw the new press release," he said. "Congratulations, man. National rollout. That's insane." I smiled. "Thanks. It still feels surreal." We sat out on the balcony that night, watching the city lights blink like quiet applause, and for the first time in years, I felt still. Not stuck. Just settled. Eric raised his glass. To doing it without them. I raised mine back. To seeing them for who they really are. That night, I slept better than I had in a decade. But there was one final thing I needed to do. Something for me. I opened an old email thread, one I'd archived years ago. It was the chain where I sent Sarah that budgeting app one built in college. The one she never opened. The one she called cute. I clicked forward. Added a message. "Thought you might need this now. It's better than cute these days. Actually works. Just like I always did." And then I hit send. I didn't wait for a reply. I didn't need one. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I wasn't hoping for recognition. I had already won. And I built it all from nothing they gave me. From scraps and silence and shadows. Independent, they called me. They were right. But they had no idea just how far I'd rise. And now? Now I never have to look back.